If you are ever unsure about which book to read next, read a classic. Because classics are classics for a reason. They stood the test of time over decades and sometimes centuries. People have loved reading them. But there is a problem with classics. There are simply too many of them. There's no way you can read all classic books. You should focus on the absolute best. So in this video, I'm gonna give you the best classic books of all time. Let's get started. And the very first one is Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn. Huckleberry Finn is an unconventional book in many ways, and that's what makes it so special. First of all, the story revolves not around a grown-up, but around a child, which is already uncommon, especially for the times during which Mark Twain wrote that book. Secondly, Huckleberry Finn is not a rich child, it's not an educated child, it's actually quite the opposite. Huckleberry Finn is an underdog. He's not going to school, he's living outside of the norms of society, and that's what makes him so interesting as a character. When on top of that he teams up with a slave that has escaped from his owners, the story only keeps getting more fast-paced and dramatic. And really, I don't want to give away too much of the plot here, I'd rather have you read it yourself. But what I like so much about this book is that it's basically a children's story. It's written from the viewpoint of a child, which makes the view on grown-up life all the more interesting, but you could also argue that it's in fact written for children. The adventures of Huckleberry Finn are incredibly entertaining, it's really immersive, and it's funny throughout the entire story. So I personally feel like it's a great book to introduce classic literature to children, but also for adults to maybe find an easy way into classic books. The second book on our list is a little bit heavier, both in topic as well as in understanding the language around it, but it's a classic and a fantastic story to immerse yourself into. It is Franz Kafka's The Trial. This is a book that I read for the first time when I was in high school. Being German myself, Kafka is part of the mandatory curriculum, and back then, as a 17-year-old boy, I really didn't expect much from a school assignment, but I remember reading that book and just being absolutely blown away by the language that Kafka is using and also by the storyline and how it unfolds. It follows the main character who, without any warning, gets arrested one morning. He doesn't really understand why. At first he thinks it's a mistake, but then as the story progresses, he more and more desperately tries to find these higher powers that want to incarcerate him. And the harder he tries, the more he realizes that he is caught in a system that doesn't allow for rectifying any mistake that was made. Again, I'm not gonna go too deep into the plot because I don't want to give anything away here, but the description of helplessness of the individual in a larger system is something that has never been captured as well as in Kafka's The Trial. And Kafka managed to tell a story there that really resonated with a lot of people at the beginning of the 20th century. People lived in big cities, they went to their jobs, but at the same time they felt like they're being individuals, they're living almost anonymously, and they're getting lost in this vast sea of humans. They are a tiny little piece in a giant machinery that is nameless and faceless and that can't really be addressed. And the helplessness that comes with that was perfectly captured by Kafka. So if you're looking for a story that is bizarre and irritating and confusing, but at the same time incredibly immersive and intriguing, then definitely check out The Trial. The next book on our list, book number 3, is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Brave New World is often compared to George Orwell's 1984 because both of the books describe dystopian futures for humanity. But while 1984 is describing a society where everybody feels suppressed and unhappy, Brave New World takes exactly the opposite approach. It describes a society where everybody's feeling eternal bliss and happiness. And they do so for a variety of reasons. Some of them being that you can eat as much as you want, you can be promiscuous as much as you want, people are not bound to any societal rules per se, but they also take a lot of drugs that create happiness within them. So really what Brave New World does is that it paints a picture of how we think life should be like. No pain, no suffering, everybody has a job, there's full happiness everywhere you look, but still the world feels a little bit off. There feels something wrong with it. So to me, even though it's a novel, the book is almost philosophical. If happiness is attainable, is it worth striving towards it? Will the world be a better place if the world is perfect? Or do we need suffering? Do we need to have unhappiness in order to be able to appreciate happiness? I think all of those are incredibly valuable questions to ask, and nowadays even more so than when the book was initially written. Nowadays we really do live in a society where objectively we have everything we need, and that in abundance. And a lot of the negative side effects of living in such a perfect society are also things that we can observe nowadays. People searching for a deeper purpose in their lives, people being overstimulated, people feeling stressed and feeling burned out while at the same time having everything they could ever want at their fingertips. For me, reading Brave New World really was an eye-opener. It made me reflect on my own life, it made me reflect on the society that we currently live in and that we built for ourselves, and it made me think about what the best direction going forward is. Do we really need more consumption? Do we need to produce more things? Or maybe does progress look like us changing our value system and looking for fulfillment within? Anyway, if any of that sounds intriguing to you, then definitely make sure to check out Aldous Huxley's classic Brave New World. And if you liked the video so far, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos just like this one in the future. Alright, we are moving quickly through this list. Book number 4 on the list of best classics of all time is possibly the book that has the best writing of all time. It is Lolita. Written by Vladimir Nabokov, Lolita is possibly one of the most controversial books ever published, because it tells the story of a middle-aged man who falls in love with a young girl, 12 years old, and describes his passion and obsession with her. So really, if you want to be frank, the story is about a pedophile. And naturally, when the book was initially published, a lot of people were repelled by that topic. And honestly, when I first read it at the beginning, I was as well. But then something interesting happened. Over the course of the story, as it unfolds, you really start to resonate with the main character. You realize that he's not essentially a creep. Instead, he's just truly in love with this person who happens to be a 12-year-old girl. And that love, especially because it's so unattainable and it's wrong on so many levels, really creates a lot of pain and suffering for the character. So it's really quite the emotional roller coaster that Nabokov takes us on. On top of that, the writing in Lolita is just absolutely beautiful. Quite honestly, I've never read anything like it. Just listen to the very first sentences of the first chapter in this book. Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul. Lolita. The tip of the tongue taking a trip of 3 steps down the palate to tap at 3 on the teeth. Lolita. So for me, Lolita has never been about this love story between an older man and a younger girl. Rather, it's been a celebration of love itself, and described in a way that has never been done before. If you love language as much as I do, then definitely go and pick up a copy of Lolita. You certainly won't regret it. And with that, we have reached book number 5 on our list of the best classics of all time. This one is Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. The story revolves around a black man in the south of the US who gets put on trial for a crime that he hasn't committed. And the development in this trial is described through the eyes of a young child. So in a way, a little bit like Huckleberry Finn. Again, a child's point of view is used to highlight how bizarre grown-ups can act. They can be judgmental, racist, dumb, and sometimes outright cruel. All of these ugly facets of humanity can be found in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. But what makes this book so outstanding is that the author doesn't try to lecture you in any way. It's not clear that those are the good guys and those are the bad guys and you have to try to always be on the good side. Rather, it shows that life is complicated, people are complicated, and you have to have a strong moral compass in order to navigate through life and make the right decisions. I know a lot of people in the US already read the book in high school. For me, being European, that was not the case. So when I recently picked it up and read it, I was quite surprised by how deep the book is, but also, honestly, how funny it is. It's a very easy to read book, it's very lighthearted, and it made me laugh several times. So for me, that's already reason enough to pick up that book. Also, my personal take on classics is that it should always be fun to read them. You shouldn't feel like it's a chore or that you have to force yourself to finish the book. Rather, you should be excited to get to read it. And that is definitely the case with To Kill a Mockingbird. And there you have it, the list of the best classic books to read of all time. Now, I know there's plenty of other books that could also be added to this list, and I'm sure you have a lot of suggestions of books that I potentially have missed. If so, make sure to put them down in the comments below, and I'm happy to have a discussion about it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.